What it also does is ensures that you can live here when it's done. So what typically happens is the project will be done, but by that time, everyone who was here has moved out to Harvey or Chicago Heights, exactly, or maybe they're not around anymore at all. So the jobs mean that we can have the income level so that you can stay in the community, because what's going to happen is it's going to get more expensive. And without the emphasis on making sure that there's affordable housing, sufficient affordable housing, people get pushed out of the community simply because they can't afford it. So the whole jobs piece is not just to say we want people to have jobs, it's because if they have the job, they stay here, they raise their families here, and there's stability. And that's the approach that those who are at the table need to have. So the issue is, what are the people at the table saying? Are they saying those things? Or are they content to get the $15,000 payout and say, oh, it's economic development? And I've seen that, unfortunately, in the work that I do around the city. I've seen it happen too often. And if I come in and say, well, 120,000 jobs, that's a $500 million workforce development initiative, and people tell me that I'm thinking too big, that's too much money. Someone who doesn't have a job will tell me I'm thinking too big, and that's a problem. So I think we need to change the mindset and make sure that those who are at the table are speaking in this way, because they're the ones that have the leverage to be able to make the best deal for the community.
Well, what would you do, just to pinpoint that example, what would you do differently than what the mayor has done, and that is to say, put up $92 million in TIF monies to that developer to get started? And you know what TIF monies were supposed to be for.
Exactly. TIF money is your tax dollars. And those of you who live in the community should have priority over a developer. If you live in the community, you should have a say in how that project is being developed. So the first step is to make sure that what kind of council, advisory, or whomever, or whatever in your community is in place to make sure that they're monitoring the developer and be able to provide recommendations on what that development could and should look like. Now, it doesn't mean that if they say they want to build a high-rise, that the community says, no, you should build a convenience store instead. No. But it says that if they're going to invest in that community, if they want to actually develop in that community, that those who live there should have a say on what that development looks like. You should be able to talk about what the facade of the project looks like. You should be able to talk about what kinds of jobs you need to train people for in the community. You should be able to talk about if you think that it should have 2 high-rises instead of 3. That's the kind of input that you should have. The developer is not in, their bottom line is profit. They're not invested in your community, they're invested in making money. But if you live in the community, you have more at stake. So you should be at the table. There has to be some sort of guiding body that's not just an alderman, especially an alderman who's beholden to the mayor, that's helping to drive the development process.
So that kind of prefigured my question, and you said that TIFs are tax dollars. Here on 71st Street, we have prime examples of blight that could be remedied with TIF money if it were being used the way it was intended to by the state legislature. But those TIF accounts were drained to build a new school in the neighborhood. Can you talk about your sort of fiscal plan for how TIFs would be used under your mayoralty, and how you would actually move our municipal expenditures back under the regular budget?
Well, the easy answer is just to use TIFs for the purpose for which they were created, which is to address blight in the community. And we've moved so far away from that most people don't know what TIFs were originally intended to do. And so for me, I think TIF reform requires that there's more accountability in how those dollars are spent and more local accountability. The mayor should not have carte blanche to determine how those TIF dollars are spent. If the community says that they want a certain thing, then that's actually what's to drive how those dollars are spent. I think right now what happens is your alderman is the key person in determining how your TIF dollars are spent. So if your alderman is not advocating for some of the things that the community groups have said would be better alternatives, then you're going to get a school. And if you have an alderman that is not independent, that's beholden to the mayor, if the mayor calls and says, hey, we're going to put the school in your ward, and we're going to use your TIF dollars, well, what are they going to say? So for me, it's about, at the top level, there definitely has to be more accountability in an open process we need to actually be showing people how their tip dollars are spent, and that's not just putting up 20,000 pages of PDFs online, which is what we currently do. And we need to make sure, again, that we're electing aldermen who are working on behalf of the community, who can make decisions to say, this is how we believe our tip dollars should be spent, and then do that. Not that when they get the call from someone else, they're just going to go where the mayor directs them.
I have another question. So I'm generally very critical of Mayor Emanuel, with the exception of his work on transportation in the city. I think, you mentioned that we are a logistics and transportation hub. Our economy depends on moving goods and people around, a lot of them, and quickly. Can you talk about what your vision for transportation would be if you were mayor?
Well, so there's two levels. So one is our location as, we're probably located as a central transportation hub in the Midwest and actually internationally. And so I'm definitely in favor of preserving that. I think when we get down to the quality of life issue, one of the key issues is making sure that our services, our transportation as a service to the public, are properly maintained. That means that we should have, I actually propose revamping the way that we do our bus system and having shorter bus lines that are much more on time and much more consistent. A lot of what you see, and those of you who take public transportation now, at least in some of the busier corridors, the buses will come every 20 minutes, and sometimes it'll be 40 minutes, and then there'll be 3 buses piled on top of each other and show up, right? So that's been my experience. If you actually break up the lines and have shorter routes with those buses, they have a much shorter span that they're responsible for, and they're much more on time and much more consistent. So that's one thing that I want to do. I'm also interested in looking at alternative forms of transportation. This is more innovative, but I like the idea of having ferry boats. They can take you from downtown to the north side to the south side instead of using the streets. I think that's something that we could do and should do. I mean, I've seen it elsewhere and it seemed to work, so I'd be all for that. I also, there's some structural things that I would propose differently about the people that we employ in the transportation sector. I think one issue is the current way that they are shifted. I think is a little bit of a safety hazard. So I don't know if you know, well, you probably heard of the woman who was working overtime and on the Blue Line and fell asleep, drove the train up the steps. I think that's problematic, and we have to actually change the way that our specifically bus operators, train operators are shifted so that they're not fatigued when they're working, because it is a fairly intensive job. But overall, I think preserving our location as a transportation hub, I mean, that's a regional issue. So in the tri-state region, there are things that we're doing. But I think at the ground level, we should be more innovative. I think shorter bus lines, and I think improving service quality. And the most important thing is making sure that it's affordable. I think we wasted money on venture. It wasn't necessary. Nobody asked for it. And our private operators are profiting off of those of us who use public transportation. And now it's becoming more expensive. And I'll just add this last point, is that the thing that happens when we privatize our public assets, like our public transportation system, is that there's no accountability to the public. So private companies are accountable to their shareholders. And for them, the bottom line is profit. So once we privatize that public asset, they're not thinking about you as the person who's trying to get to work every day. They're thinking about how do we make sure that we make as much money this quarter as possible. And when we privatize, it never comes back into the hands of the public. So the rates right now, what is it, $2.25 for a line and no transfers? Who can afford that? I can't afford that, not every day. But then again, who is public transportation designed for? For people who don't want to drive, who perhaps can't afford a car, or don't want to pay gas, or don't want to get tickets every day so they don't drive. The issue is maintaining service delivery and keeping it affordable, and for that we have to keep it in the hands of the public. And right now what the mayor has done in transportation-wise, at least for that specific area, is he's privatized our public transportation system, and that means it's only going to get more expensive for those of us who can't afford it.
I have something. My name is Mike. I never heard you say anything about crime. Now, I feel if you don't clean up the crime, all the ideas will go down the drain. Crime is high, real high.
Yes.
I live in Inglewood 40 years. And Y'all say Inglewood is good, but it's crime. Our teenagers, our youth don't have anything to do. It's just crime. And the mayor just looking past it.
Well, he's not looking past it, he's coming up with creative ways to repackage it. So again, the issue of crime, I think, is it's a result of many things that have not happened. And I think it's more directly related to our inability to address the issues of poverty in our communities. And so again, this comes back to investment. When we don't invest, for example, in the park district or in our public schools, it means that kids don't have things to do, productive things to do when they're outside of school or when they're outside of work. And so I believe that we have to invest in those sorts of programs, and in our schools, in the park district, and also in youth employment. But I also believe this comprehensive jobs program in vital sectors, low barrier to entry sectors of the economy, is the best way to reduce crime, because when people are working, they're not doing other things. Or maybe they're too tired to commit crimes because they've been working all day. Or they have money to actually pay for themselves and their families. So a lot of the crime is not just because people in Inglewood happen to be criminals or people in Austin happen to be prone to crime. That's not the case. It's because they don't have enough options to where they can be productive members of society. And the best way to do that is by making sure that everyone who can work has access to a job. For younger people, they have to have other productive outlets. We also have to have resources. So a lot of kids that I work with they exhibit signs of post-traumatic stress disorder. And it's because they see some things in their day-to-day life, in their community, things that we as adults probably couldn't handle. And yet, what are the resources in the community that help them to work through things like using restorative justice? That's something that I'm a big proponent of, where they actually build accountability to the community instead of just locking you up or throwing you in jail. Restorative justice is actually something that builds people up. You understand what you did, but you pay it back into your community instead of taking you out of the community, and then when you come back, you can't do anything. So what are you going to do? You're going to go back to what you've been doing before. So something like restorative justice practice should be citywide. Some things like peace circles. A lot of the outbursts and the anger that we see is because there are no resources for people to process through those emotions, through those issues. We have kids that I've worked with in the community that they've experienced violence or battery, and then they go to school, and we expect them to learn and be happy. No, without the resources, without fully funding our schools and funding those extracurricular activities, they don't have the resources to process through those emotions. And so we see outbursts with shootings and people acting out of anger, that's also contributing to the crime. So for us, we have to see crime as not a thing in and of itself. It's a multifaceted issue that's the result of several things that have not happened. And specifically, it's because we have not invested in eradicating poverty. We have not addressed the issues of poverty that impact everyone in the community. I can guarantee you, if this summer, if you have 20,000 young people in Inglewood and they're working, the crime rate will go down. It's happening. If they have activities that they're able to take part in, take advantage of, the crime rate will go down. But as long as this city, this leadership is more interested in manipulating statistics and telling you one thing while we know it's another, we're not gonna ever address the root of the issue. And so we have to have people who are interested in addressing the root of the issue, not interested in doing what's politically expedient and what's going to keep them in office until the next election cycle is over. And that's the circumstances that we have now.
Great, we have only time, unfortunately, for one more question, because we have to be out of here by 12. So maybe, actually, why don't Ida and Randy, why don't you both ask your questions? And maybe you can answer both of them in your response and close up. Does that sound good? Okay, so.
Oh, okay. I'm Ida Watanabe. I live with him, that guy.
They're very curious.
But excuse me, I was wondering about, I know you're very interested in education, and I was wondering what has happened to vocational education in this system, because we know that a lot of kids aren't going to college, and they shouldn't. But they can be trained for skills. I mean, they can develop skills. And I remember Chicago Vocational High School, they had a huge building where kids used to go there and learn trades or school, various kinds of skills. And why can't that be a part of our focus, vocational education, so that kids come out with some skills that they can use in the current job market. Yeah.
And even Lane Tech had a technical
Right.
to it.
Right.
Before kids go to college, and it's not like that.
Yes, and that's actually a part of my.
Wait, so I have a question about vocational education.
Oh.
I'm trying to.
Sorry.
Sorry.
Hi, I'm Brandy. And my question is about housing. I think South Shore has great bones, but when I found out about a year ago that we have the highest number of voucher recipients within the city, that creates a neighborhood of, in essence, poverty. And so how can you have a viable neighborhood when there's no training, there's no programs? So I'm just curious about your ideas on housing in the city, and absentee landlords, because I think that plays into the whole crime issue. It plays into a lot of different issues. So just ideas on housing.
Slumlords, don't forget them.
I said absentee landlords.
Slum.
Sorry. Specifically slum and absentees.
So on the vocational education, that's actually part of my education and workforce platform. What happened in this country is that maybe 60 years ago, we decided that vocational education was not important. And so we started to remove it from our schools, and we began to push this narrative of college bound, college for all, everybody go to college. And so in other places around the world, they actually have very clear dual tracks where you can go to college, but you also have this vocational education system. So if you go to Germany, very clearly defined, and you see where their economy is. And so the mistake that we made, and this is, so the mayor is saying now, 100% college ready, 100% college bound, is wrong. It is not good policy. Because number one, with the expensive nature of college, and I am a living testament.
Yeah, it's very expensive. We all, yeah, I think we all,
Where you think I go to school?
yes.
Exactly, you're in debt, and also you're not necessarily working in an area that's paying you according to what you pay for college. And so we actually have to make sure that in every school we have vocational education. We need people who can operate CNC machines. We need people who can be welders because there are jobs that they're trying to fill. And the example that I'll give is that I was working with a manufacturing company, and they had a job opening for a CNC operator. They were going to pay $75,000 for this position. They were also going to pay for your education up to a PhD if you just knew how to operate this machine. That job was vacant for 2 years. I almost went and got a certification with my job to get trained so I could take that job. So there are jobs in the economy, but because we walked away from vocational education, we're now finding that none of us have the skills for those jobs.
Exactly.
And so the first step is to build a pipeline into those jobs and revitalize vocational education in our schools. And there's a good example of that. It's over in Pilsen. It's Blue 1647, run by an African-American gentleman named Emil Camry, who's teaching people how to operate CNC machines, how to do 3D printing, how to do all of these forward-looking skills that we need to have if we want to be employed later on. So I'm in a different, complete other direction. The mayor wants everyone to go to college. Good luck. But if you want a diverse and strong economy, you have to understand that everyone is not going to go to college, and we need to have people that are trained in the jobs of the future. And if we don't do that, we're not going to see our economy improve. On the housing piece. So with people who get vouchers, so the key is that the voucher allows you to stay in the community, right? Because now you have housing. So again, the key is how to make sure that those individuals have access to jobs where they can work, where they can be contributors, where they can be stable. So it's not necessarily an issue of being in a community where there are a lot of people that have vouchers. It's an issue where there are no resources for those individuals to move beyond where they are economically. So when you find a job that you can pay for yourself and your children, you're less transient. You're less likely to see where you are as just a temporary facility and move on to the next thing, which means that you're not taking care of it as much. So again, for me, it does come down to what are the resources that exist in that community to support individuals who use housing vouchers, particularly in this area. Now, for our slumlords, I think it's a major problem, but I think that it comes down to advocacy at the ground level to hold them accountable. I think your aldermen should be involved in that process. I think they should be speaking on behalf of the community to say, if we have a group of residents that have said that this landlord is not doing what they should be doing, then that alderman should be the one that goes directly to that landlord and talks to them about what it is that they're doing so that their viability is threatened as a landlord. That's something that needs to happen. And I don't, I was staying in a building where there was like some kind of gas leak. And for 2 weeks, no one did anything, even though they kept complaining, saying that there was some sort of funny smell or whatever in the building, and no one did anything. Now, if the building explodes, then what? Now, 50 people have been killed because you have a landlord that was not present. If you're going to be a landlord, you have to be willing to invest in the community, to invest in your building, and that should be a requirement. And the people that hold them accountable are groups like leaders in the community, advocacy councils, of residents, homeowners associations, and your aldermen, to make sure that they're not just allowed to, all you have is a space, and that's it, and not maintain it.
I'm so sorry, I have to,
He cutie.
we won't have any meet and greet time. After this question, we have to everyone has to help me clean up.
I'll put it up.
And get up out of here, okay? Okay, because I know I said only till 12, so yeah. So please, yes. Thank you.
I just had a quick question. My name is Joyce Burns. I'm from the Chatham area. I'm a guest of Dwayne. And I just want to know, what can you let us know and the voters know? Because I see that you have an extensive background and you've been doing wonderful work. But what can you let us know where your key factors are going to stand out from his and let us know that, as you being the next candidate for mayor, that you have it all and that you're going to, everything that you're stating to us, that you're bringing to the table, I know it's going to take time, but it will, slowly, gradually happen because people thought that he was going to, be there and help us, and help the communities. And later on we found out that, it wasn't so.
Well, I believe my responsibility is to be open and transparent. So everything that I stand for, I put out there, and I just do it in a very candid way. I have no interest in presenting an image of something. So the things that I talk about are the things that are important to me as someone who lives in the city, who hopes to have kids in the city. And so the only thing that I can ask or hope is that it resonates with people who happen to feel the way that I feel. The issue is, I've heard Mayor say no one asked any questions. We just thought we were getting something, and then we realized 4 years later what we got. So everyone has buyer's remorse now. So if nothing else, we need to start asking those critical questions. So something like this, where you can actually ask me questions, this is not scripted, there's no preparation. Those are the kind of, that's what helps you to decide who is actually authentic, who's actually in the interest of the city, and who's just out there because they have some other agenda. So my responsibility is to be very transparent, very open, to make myself accessible, and to just to speak from my heart, the things that I feel. That's all. I feel like that's all that I can really do.
Okay. Tell people how they can get in touch with you if they want to be part of the campaign or anything after this.
Yes, so there are cards on the table if you didn't get one. We need volunteers, people who are interested in volunteering in every capacity. If you want to be on field, if you want to do social media, if you want to do hosted events like this. We've made it very easy. So on the card it has all of our information on there. If you go to our website, amaraforchicago.com, that's FOR. It has a form where you can invite me to an event, you can host an event, you can sign up to be a volunteer, you can share your ideas, all of that through our website. We'll also be able to collect your information for our listserv, so when we send out our monthly newsletter that has updates on what we're doing. But we encourage you to do that very quickly because time is of the essence. We're on social media. Everything is Amara for Chicago. I learned that when your name is interesting, you have to be consistent so people can get it. So Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Foursquare, YouTube, Vimeo, all the stuff. It's all the same. Amara for Chicago. So, and please, please spread the word. Like and share the page on Facebook. Tell people, talk to people. That's the best marketing. It's actually word of mouth. If we don't have $20 billion to buy ads on TV, a conversation with someone, telling them what you heard and what you're thinking is the most effective way of getting the word out. So I would highly, highly encourage you to do that as well.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.